Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I am super excited for today's video. It is going to be my 6th update for my Pan That palette, which I am currently panning the ABH Sultry palette. This is my first year doing a Pan That palette and we have officially made it to the halfway point. We are halfway through the year. How is it going? It's going. It has been like an interesting experience and there's definitely been a few moments where I'm like, ugh, I kind of want to quit this for the year. But then I'm like, no, I want to see the whole year out. And I'm trying to think through what I want to do next year. I'm thinking about possibly doing every 4 months, either every 3 or every 4 months. I'm thinking every 4 months do a different palette to focus on next year and maybe try and hit pan on like every single shade in that palette, perhaps palettes that are getting older in my collection. Because I feel totally comfortable now. Like even if you were to take my Sultry palette away from me today, I would be comfortable with it. So if you guys have any feedback on what you want next year, I want to do a Pan That palette of some sort, but potentially not commit to like the same palette for the full year. Leave me your feedback down below. I feel like you guys always have the best ideas, the best feedback. So I have used this palette actually quite a bit this past month, but it's for basically the same shade or couple of shades every single time. So there are some shades in this palette that have gone virtually untouched. I mentioned maybe 2 updates ago, I was feeling a little bit burnt out. The tones in this palette don't scream summer to me. And I really wanted to give myself the summer to just reach for this palette as I felt like it and not put too much pressure on me. I don't care if I use every single shade completely up in this palette. If I use 4 shades up completely in this palette, I will feel proud of that. Biggest thing is I wanted to use this. It's one of my favorite and already most used palettes in my collection, but I wanted to use it, give it love, and then feel good about decluttering it at the end of the year. I was hoping to hit pan in every single shade by the end of the year, and there's a couple shades that make me a little bit nervous about that, but we are going to get into all of that. If you're curious about my update for my Pan That palette, stay tuned. First, if you have yet to subscribe to my channel and you like project panning content or just chit-chatting about makeup, I'd love for you to consider subscribing before moving on. And other than that, let's jump into the video. You guys, today is Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, day 5 of no energy drinks. And let me tell you, I've literally been drinking minimum 1 energy drink since like 2017. So it's a big deal. So I've been trying to drink something else carbonated to like give me the fix without the caffeine. I am obsessed with, is it Perrier? I can't ever pronounce anything. You guys know that if you watch my channel. But then I'll drink this stuff while I'm filming and like can't stop burping. TMI. So I reached for the Sultry palette a total of 24 times this past month, but most of those times I was reaching into Birch. I've actually very recently started to repurpose Birch as a bronzer just to get more use out of it. I have it as a bronzer today. Only thing is it's like really difficult to get a brush in there, but I don't want to completely depot this one because this is like my most reached for just one and done shadow as well. So let's get into how many times I have reached for each of the shades within this palette, and then we'll get into my goals at the end. I think for July, I just, again, I'm kind of going to reach for this palette as I feel fit. And, you know, hopefully I think I could expand the pan potentially. I like how I say we'll talk about goals at the end, and here I go yabbering about goals. What? Yabbering? Is that even a word? I think I was going to say yakking and jabbering. I think I could expand teak quite a bit more this summer, or this July. I feel like I could use steampunk and teak to create really like gold bronzy looks. So maybe a goal should be to hit pan on steampunk. Ember, I feel like I'm also getting close to, and I feel like I could mix the 3 of those together. Could I have a pan? Like, should that be a goal? I did also start the project Level Up in mid-June. So I have a lot of eyeshadows that I'm focusing on now, but I do feel like Steampunk, Ember, and Teak could go really nicely with my NARS Orgasm Rising palette. So maybe I should actually challenge myself and not say just F it this month and actually try and hit 2 new pans. I think I could potentially complete Pearl as well. I've been using it as like a body highlight. I don't have it as a highlight today, but I've been using it on the shoulders to highlight, and I use a pretty significant amount each time just because it's a chunkier shade too, so it feels like every time I use it, it just kind of crumbles apart. It's like getting to that point. Okay, we're gonna be so aggressive with our July goals, and maybe I'll regret this and fail miserably. Pearl, we're gonna complete that shade this next month. We're gonna hit a pan on Steampunk, and we're gonna hit a pan on Ember, and then we're gonna expand Teak. And hopefully Birch, just because Birch is super easy to reach for. And then hopefully I can reach for each shade at least one time in July, because that did not happen in June, and I don't think it happened in May either. Now that we've talked goals, let's really get into each shade. So I will pop up dual pictures on the screen. I like to post on the top the picture of what this palette looked like when we started this project, and then the bottom picture will be what the palette is looking like now, and we'll go shade for shade. So starting with the shade Pearl, obviously this was my first empty shade in this palette. I reached for this a total of 69 times within this project to hit that, or to empty out that pan. So then moving along to Pearl, I reached for Pearl a total of 5 times this past month, putting me at 47 total uses in this project. And again, this is going to be something that I really try to make an effort to complete. This needs to be a complete pan. This will be one of my completes. Moving on to Steampunk, I did not reach for Steampunk at all this past month, so I've reached for Steampunk a total of 15 times within this project. Would love to hit a pan on this shade next month. We actually still have 5 out of 14 shades in this palette that don't have a pan. Moving on to Rose Quartz, I only reached for Rose Quartz two total times this past month, putting me at only 27 uses within this project. Rose Quartz is a favorite shade of mine, so I thought I would be getting more use out of this, but it doesn't pop as much on the eyes as I have been liking, so I think that's why I haven't been reaching for this one as much. Would love to use this maybe at least 5 times in July. I feel like that would be a very achievable goal, just to get a little bit more of an expansion on that pan. Moving on to Ember. Ember I have not reached for much this year, but I did reach for it 1 total time this past update, so I have reached for Ember 15 total times. Let's hit a pan on Ember this month. We can do it. Moving on to Bloom, I will show you for Bloom. I will pop up a picture of what Bloom looked like last month when I repressed it to where Bloom looks like now. It looks like a mess. I ended up mixing Bloom with a highlighter topper out of a Smashbox palette that I love, and making my own custom blush. I have reached for this blush 6 total times this past month, which puts me at 21 total uses for the shade Bloom. I do not think that I will finish this as a blush. It is a very beautiful, like sunburny sort of blush, but I think once we reach like September time, I won't reach for this one that much. So would just love to get some use out of this. I will probably just still keep this repressed and in this palette even beyond this year, because I actually really do like it as a blush. I think it's a really beautiful sunburn sort of glowy blush, but I don't think I'll finish that blush this year. Then we have Birch. Birch is one of my most reached for, well, my second most reached for aside from Fresh. And Birch I've reached for 15 total times this last month, putting me at 65 total uses in this project. I use this all the time in my crease, and then I, again, recently have started using this as a bronzer. I am hoping we have like 2 or 3 more months. Like if I used Birch as a bronzer for a couple more months, I really do think that that could be an empty shade by like maybe October, just to give me a little leeway. But Birch is a shade that I do want to be a fully completed shade by the end of the year. I believe in myself. I believe I can do that. Moving on to the bottom row, we have the shade Cinder. I've reached for Cinder 0 times this past month, which puts me at 18 uses in this project. I really like the shade Cinder. I think similar to Rose Quartz, it just doesn't pop on the eyes. It's not quite as sparkly as what I'm going for these days, which is why I've struggled to reach for it some. But I will continue. We'll continue on with this one, and hopefully we will have a pan. This is something I could see myself reaching for more in the fall time, so I know I'll hit a pan on this before the end of the year. It definitely won't be a completed shade though. Moving on to the shade Twig. This used to be my most reached for pan of eyeshadow in this palette. It was the first pan that I hit in this palette, but it's a little bit more ashy and a little bit more gray toned than I'm preferring these days. I have reached for Twig 3 times in the past month, which puts me at only 15 total uses in this project. I'll be really curious to see what this pan looks like from the beginning of the year to now, because I do feel like it's expanded some, and I'll be really curious to see what I can do with this shadow by the end of the year. This is something I definitely could use as a contour. I just don't contour that much, and I have other contours I'm miserably failing at trying to pan. So that's where we sit with Twig. Moving on to Teak. Teak has actually gotten more, it looks more used than I was anticipating. I didn't think this one would be one of the larger pans in this palette when I started this project this year. So Teak, I reached for actually 6 total times this past month, putting me at 30 total uses in this project. I don't necessarily know that Teak could be a completely empty shade by the end of this project, but it pairs so nicely with so many different looks. It's really easy to just pop on the eyes in the outer third to kind of deepen up the look with a little bit of a sheeny sparkle to it. So I'm really curious to see what I can do with this shade. I would be so proud of myself if this was an actual empty shade. This was a shade with not even much of a disturbance, if I'm remembering correctly, at the beginning of the year. So I'm really excited about the progress here and excited to keep going with this one. And then we get to the 4 least exciting shades in the project. So we have the shade Dystopian, which used to be a shade that I use in my brows as a brow powder. I have used it as a brow powder this year. I also use it in my hairline quite a bit. I reached for this a total of 5 times since the last update. I am at 48 total uses in this project, but this is such a hard pressed, dusty, powdery, chalky shade. It's just really dry and it doesn't work well aside from like using it in my hairline or using it as a brow powder. I don't like using this on the eyes because I feel like it looks really patchy. So I also just feel like I'm looking at this right now and I'm like, I swear, and I know there's hard pan in here as well. I'm just like, dang, how do I expand the pan on this? As I look, I'm like, I do see a good dip, but it just feels like this shadow, no matter how many times I use it, doesn't move at all. So I'll be very curious to see where we end the year with that shadow. Moving on to the shade Cyborg. This is such a beautiful shade, but I just do not find myself reaching for silvers all that frequently. I did not reach for this shade at all this past month, so I'm only at 13 total uses in this project. I have used this as a nail polish a couple of times, but it's more like subdued. It's not as sparkly on the nails as I was hoping. So I feel like I could try that a few more times, and I just need to do a few more like silvery smoky looks and get use out of this. This is a shade I just want to hit a pan on and I will feel happy with that, but no pan yet on Cyborg and only 13 uses. Then moving on to the shade Slate. I tried to Franken a shade with this. That's the only reason there's a pan in this shade. I didn't reach for this at all this past month. I'm only at 7 total uses. I can't even find the Franken shade that I made, but it wasn't good anyway. I just don't reach for grays. So even if this barely gets much more use by the end of the year, I'll be fine, because I just don't reach for a gray, and why am I gonna force myself to do that? And then finally we have the shade Nior, which is obviously just a black matte shade, which I also don't reach for that frequently. I reached for this 1 total time this past month, putting me at 13 total uses. I like a liquid black liner, and the way that I've used Nior is to try and go over top of that with a powder, but that just feels like an extra step at times to me, and I just never use a black matte. So I don't know if I'll be able to hit a pan in this shade by the end of the year. I want to, because I want a pan in every single shade, but we'll see. We'll see. Nior and Slate, I'm like, whatever. But that is where we sit with my sultry palette. I am like looking at this palette. Well, first of all, I've used this 114 total times this year. So already that just makes me so happy. I'm like, we're halfway through the year. That means I'm trending to be at over 200 uses by the end of the year. So that feels really, really good. I think I would be happy if we had a pan in every single shade. We had fresh, pearl, birch, and teak. That would be 1, 2, 3. That would be 4, plus bloom is my blush. But I would love to at least 4 empty shades by the end of the year, meaning I do need to like really work on teak. I'm really wanting to have pearl as an empty and hit 2 more pans. That would feel really, really good. I feel like I just haven't hit a ton of eyeshadow pan this year. So that is gonna be my goal for next update, is to have 2 new pans and 1 complete shade, and a significant expansion on the shade teak. But would love to know in the comments, you guys, are you currently doing a pan that palette? Have you worked on the ABH Sultry palette? Do you have other ways you think I should be using these shades? Let a girl know in the comments below. Other than that, thank you so much for sticking around to watch today's video and for supporting my channel as you guys always do. I love you guys so much, and I'll catch you in my next video. Bye.